like to call the meeting to order. If you'd stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Trustee Carter.
Present.
Trustee Mariscal.
Present.
Trustee Kazam. Trustee Gett.
Present.
Trustee Weisenberg.
Present.
Trustee DeVore.
Present.
Okay, we would be at item 4, approval of minutes from the departmental meeting on Tuesday, February 4th, 2020. I'd ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any questions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. We would be at comments from the audience. Anyone want to address the board? Come forward. Comments from the audience going once, twice. Comments from the audience are closed. We'll go right into old business. Any old business to come for the board?
The only thing I had was, have we received anything yet from the art fair for what they're requesting? Weren't they going to give us some type of a printout of some sort of what they were requesting for like the porta potties and all of that?
Yes, they are. I met with them today. They're going to get something together, and I will probably have that in the next couple of weeks for the board to review. So,
Okay,
yep.
just wondering. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other old business? Going right into new business, we have a presentation, the first presentation of the budget.
Okay.
Take it away, Stephanie.
Thank you. So I know that this side of the
And
table.
if I may, anyone who wants to go down there and see the screen, if you want a better view, feel free to move. So.
Yeah, we've got a couple of seats if you want to see. We do also have printouts for you, so you should be able to follow along. This presentation is primarily on next year's budget, but we do have a few things about the current and also the history. The first slide is actually about the history, just to give a little bit of an idea of how far the village has come. So the first top shows 10 years ago that the cash reserves started that fiscal year over $2 million. There was a budgeted deficit over $1 million. Actuals, and this is kind of important, budgets are a sort of guideline. They're not exact. You want to spend around them, but in general, we never spend exactly to them. And revenues even, we don't exactly hit them, but it's basically to give us an idea of kind of, it's a game plan of where we're going. And you can see that in this particular year, 10 years ago, where they budgeted a deficit of 1.3 million and actuals came in underneath that. Still a significant deficit. Cash reserves were reduced greatly. And this is kind of, I think, I had just gone back 10 years as a number, but I think it kind of shows maybe the start of where things started to get a little rough financially for the village. So then 5 years after that, 5 years ago, you can see that cash reserves are down to about $500,000. This is about the time when things kind of had hit where they were at the lowest and started to bounce back. Cash reserves are down around $500,000. There was a budgeted surplus that year of $12,000, but for a lot of reasons, the actual surplus that year was over $300,000. So that brought the cash reserves back. And you can see 2 years ago, 1 year ago, things just keep kind of getting better and better. The budget starts to become a little bit, there's still deficits planned, but you're seeing in the actuals that things are not being spent to that. So it was a combination of boards budgeting for things, allowing for possibilities, hoping for things to come in better than what they actually did, and then when they started to see the numbers were not coming in where they wanted to, spending what they had so that we ended up with surpluses. You can see that in fiscal year 18-19, that is where I think Mayor talks about this a lot. That's the year that the first presentation of the budget had a $900,000 deficit. The board worked to get that down to a passed budget with a $188,000 deficit, but a lot of changes were made that year, and the actual surplus was $300,000. And then this year, the one that we're in right now, we had a budgeted surplus of about $156,000. The projections that I have right now put us at an actual surplus about $230,000. So that's kind of just where the context of where this is all coming from. On the next page, you can see the actuals for this particular budget. The general fund revenues, we budgeted over $4 million. Our projections are actually not going to quite meet that. And so because of that, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but because of the way things worked out this year, our revenue projections for next year, our revenue budget for next year is a little bit lower. I'm seeing a little bit less in sales tax, so I'm going to pull things back a little bit just to make sure that we have revenues that we're able to meet and that we don't hope for things. We can hope for things to do better, but I think we need to plan for them to kind of fall back a little bit. You can also see that in the budget for expenditures, we budgeted a little bit high, allowing for emergencies, allowing for some things. The actual expenses, the actual projections in that middle column came in. The budget, the departments are doing great. They're coming in underneath their budget. They're basically doing really well. So for next year, we've budgeted a little bit more projects, a little bit, but not too much more. So the budget for next year isn't going up too much, and we do have a surplus at the end of next year of $16,194. So moving on, you can see on the next page, this is the budget in its entirety. We'll talk a lot about the general fund, but there are things other than the general fund that this budget will cover. The waterworks is going to have a surplus next year. Police pension fund will be zeroed out. We'll send out to them exactly what we levied. The motor fuel tax has a surplus. We're going to start kind of building that up a little bit for some projects that we have in the pipeline. The business development district funds, they'll have a little bit of a surplus, but they're starting to come online, so they're starting to spend some money, do some improvements. The TIF fund is a little bit of an oddball. We don't really budget that. We're not required to because we have an overarching budget that basically lives the life of the TIFs, but I usually like to acknowledge that they will have revenues and expenses. It will operate at a deficit next year according to my projections, but that's kind of what the TIFs do in the early years. The special service areas, those are basically all of the economic development agreements that we have. So you can see the expected transfers and revenues that will be coming in there. Expenses are primarily made in the form of payments of either bonds or payments to the developers. It is operating at a slight surplus, so that's good. The INF looks like a bad thing. The INF has revenues of $160,000, expenses of $229,000. And the reason that is that we always zero out the INF to allow for the possibility of spending it all. We will not do that. It's simply an accounting thing. It's something we do for paper reasons, but it's not actually something that will happen. Service deposit funds, those are the funds that we take in. We take a $35 deposit on every water account, so essentially you'll see about the amount that you take in go back out in form of payments to the people who've sold homes.
Can we ask questions during this, or do we wait?
Do you have a preference? Why don't we wait?
Okay.
All right, on the next page shows the breakdown of our general fund revenues. You can see, we've talked about this before in the past, that the state sales tax and the home rule sales tax are a significant portion of the income that we receive, at about 38% of the total income. If you start adding in the income tax and food and beverage, it gets even higher. Those numbers are actually down this year. And that's part of the reason why our total revenues are actually a little bit lower this year than what we had budgeted last year. Overall, though, you can see kind of just the breakdown of where the village gets its money. Most of it is tax, but we do also, a significant portion of it is waste disposal fee, license and permits, and admin fees, and also just, I know the mayor talks about this, 3% of that is the property tax. Moving on, this is to show you what I keep talking about with the sales tax coming in low. The lighter blue is the home rule, and then the darker one is the state sales tax. You can see that for the most part, it's not that different this year than what it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It's not really increased steadily. We're not seeing it increasing and staying up. We did have an excellent year last year, but this year things are kind of coming back a little bit. Don't really know exactly what next year will bring. Hope for a good year, but just in case, we'll plan for something kind of in line with the average, which is about what this year was. From there, the expenses. we have a breakdown of which departments are spending what percentage of the total budget. This is a little bit misleading. I know that you see that big section that is assigned to police. It's important to note that the police department carries 16 of our 27 full-time employees. So primarily the police department has a lot of its funds wrapped up in payroll simply because they have the largest number of employees. The next slide is a sort of highlight of what each department has put in requests to spend, the big ticket items for each department. Admin is looking to make some additional transfers to the police pension fund. They also have the comprehensive plan payments come out of the economic development line. Legal services is a significant portion of their budget as well. It is down a little bit, and so we'll be pulling the next year's projected amount down, so that's good news. Fire department under professional services is going to start paying for the IT service contract, so their professional service line is up quite a bit. They're also going to start doing some fire hose testing that Greg will be bringing to the board for approval. That's about $5,000. And then for uniform allowance, both this year and next year, there's about $15,000 that they'd like to spend on turnout gear to start replacing some of their gear. The police department has pretty much just a couple of items. They're requesting to replace 2 squad cars and also to spend about $23,000 in equipment purchases. That's pretty normal for them. Street department is looking to do some repairs to their roof down at the Boulevard garage. They're also wanting to start a maintenance contract for I think it's for the traffic lights. Am I correct in that? Traffic lights? All right. Which is increase their street lighting and traffic control line item $3,000. Just as a note, that it was at $20,000 projected for this year. That's simply because of an insurance payment that had to come out of here, so that's not normal, so we won't carry that over to next year. They're also going to, in their professional service line, they're requesting to do a contract that would bring us back an evaluation of the roads and the sidewalks condition. Let us know where our worst roads and streets are, roads and sidewalks are. They're also looking to start paying for some waste disposal that they're going to need to do, them and Public Works. Finally, in the tower, their main things are going to be the Tower Park events, the movie nights, the yoga night, Halloween. Also, the salaries are being increased so that we can have increased open hours over the summer and the fall. And building maintenance is increased from their normal so that we can start possibly do some preventative maintenance on the tower. I'll go through these next ones pretty fast, but these are essentially charts to show you for each department how much of the budget they're spending and then also what kind of things they're spending it on. So for admin, you can see that their main expense is professional services, which is the comprehensive plan, marketing, legal services, basically anything that we have to hire outside consultants for, which makes sense that admin would be spending a fair amount in that. For the fire department, their main expense comes from professional services, which again, it's things like for them, they have the telecommunications or dispatcher contract. That's a big portion of their budget that's coming out. They also have a significant amount spent in debt service and in operating costs, so they have a lot of things that they have to purchase. Police department, as we previously discussed, is primarily made up of payroll costs. Everything else is pretty low portion of their budget. Street, which also has a fair number of employees, has a large portion of it that's to salary, and then after that it's pretty much broken up very evenly among the different kinds of operating things. Street related are things specifically related to like roads or sidewalks or traffic control signs, just kind of keeping everything up. Tower Park is split pretty evenly among all of its different things, and it's mostly just related to costs of keeping it running. And finally, we have the waste disposal, which shows that of the total budget, our waste disposal contract is 11% of our total spending, and the majority of that is toward the garbage contract. Next slide is a slide to show you the general fund cash reserve balance. This kind of shows you what I was talking about earlier about the history. You can see where at the start of 2012, the cash balance was somewhere around 500,000, kind of moves up and around. And then the purple towards the end shows you last fiscal year with the green showing you this year, and you can see that it's starting to really trend upward. This is a little misleading. We do have over 1.6 million in reserves as of right now, but there are transfers of funds that I need to make in the next 2 months that'll kind of bring that back down before the end of the fiscal year. So we have some transfers to specialized fund and economic development transfers we have to make before the end of the year. Moving on to Waterworks, they have a projected surplus this year of $242,000 and a budgeted surplus next year of $147,000. They've put in spending requests to spend an additional $100,000 next year on maintenance of the utility system. Specifically, they're requesting to start doing some well rehabilitation and maintenance. They're also looking to spend more money in professional services for things like waste disposal and some additional contracts with vendors. Rental, this is a big one. They've requested money to start renting a hydrovac truck, which would allow them to more easily do repairs on water mains. And also, I believe, to more easily do repairs to the shutoff valves. We've got a list of shutoff valves that need to be repaired. And also, they've got about $13,000 in requested to do software upgrades. So they're going to do some upgrade to the meter reader software that we have.
The what software?
Meter reader. It's the things that tell us your data usage on your water meter. We've got another chart that shows the breakdown of the revenues. Essentially, as you would expect, the majority of water's revenues come from residential sales, with a decent portion coming from commercial sales as well. And then for a breakdown of expenses, a lot of it is payroll, again, like we've talked about, but they also have a significant portion that goes towards the operating costs of keeping the system up and running. And then it says fire-related, but really that's actually water-related things. So things that are specifically fixing the utility system, the water system, are that green part of the pie chart. Another slide to show you the cash reserve balance and how that's kind of changed over the last 7 years. Waterworks had significant reserves at this point in time where general fund was a little bit lower. They've been kind of keeping steady. They had started to do, you can see in about 2015, things start to kind of go downward a little bit. That's where we started to pick up with doing more maintenance on the system and doing more projects. Things are picking back up now. We're doing more maintenance, but we're also planning for it and also budgeting for it a little bit better, so you can see that growing. Finally, I'll run through this one really fast. These are all of our restricted funds. So these are funds that we can't just spend on anything. The general fund is a general operating account. Generally, as long as it is government business, we can spend those funds however we so choose. All of these funds listed here have specific uses, and we can't spend them on just anything that we want. So for the police pension fund, obviously we've levied that. It goes straight to them. For the motor fuel tax, that has to be spent on streets and roads. Business development district funds, those have to be spent in a specific area. TIF, similar, and restrictions also on what exactly is, not just every expense in that area is eligible. Special service areas, those are all dedicated economic developments. We have agreements that kind of separate them out and make sure that we spend them according to those agreements that we have. INF, we've committed to spending those funds to water infrastructure, and the service deposit funds are only refundable to the person who's put them on the account once they sell the property. The next chart that I have is for the motor fuel tax fund. This year we're going to, like I said, be taking a year off and start building up the reserves. Forest Park Drive is in need of some significant work, but we don't have the funds on hand to do that this summer. Essentially this fund gets spent out, the majority of it will be spent out early in the fiscal year. And we spent a lot of our funds last year on doing the work on Prospect, so it's a little bit low to be spending that much money that early in the fiscal year. So we talked to the engineers, and we're going to put that off for a year. We're going to look into some grant opportunities and some alternate funding sources. This year they'll be doing some seal coating and spray patching over to the east of Prospect in that neighborhood, and kind of focus a little bit more on maintenance and keeping things going as opposed to doing a big project. We'll be tackling some bigger projects next year or the following year, depending on how the funding for that works. Snow removal material, that's the salt. The cost of that's been going up steadily and continues to do so, but we gotta have it. So those are the main expenditures in that. And then the business development district, what I've done here is I've kind of combined the two BDDs together into one graph. Primarily what this one is a good split, and I'm excited to see it. We have some transfers that are necessary for economic development reasons and contracts, but we also have a couple of beautification projects that we'll be looking at. We've had some businesses request that we extend the flower pots down the downtown district all the way to Lake. That's a possibility that we're exploring. We've had some of the business talk to us about getting new, more attractive garbage and recycling receptacles, so we're looking into that. The residential housing program is something that the board is very interested in, I know, so we've got funding for $100,000 of that in this budget. The matching grants for businesses, we have increased the amount in the BDD number 1 since it's expanded, and also added a second program for BDD number 2. Beyond that, we've got some marketing money, a little bit of reserves for future projects from BDD number 1, and then there are the administrative and professional services costs. The BDDs will be helping with the cost of the village comprehensive plan. So some of that 42,000 is that, but not all. And then finally, for the restricted funds, this is the infrastructure maintenance fund. And what this is just kind of to show is, again, since we want to be able to kind of use this in case of an emergency or if something were to happen to the infrastructure, in the budget every year we put an amount in there for expenditures to zero it out, so that if there is some sort of situation that the board has the option to spend INF funds to pay for that. It brings in about $160,000, and about $125,000 of that is already dedicated to the loan. The plan is always to take the difference between the 160 and 125 and leave that in reserves and save that up for a larger project, but we do budget it this way so that if we have more flexibility if necessary. And that is the end of the overview of the budget. So I know there are questions.
Take a breath.
Before we take questions, I'll let Dustin, if you want to offer some insight into how the budget process works.
Well, yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank Stephanie for the job she's done on this. We've been meeting for the last month with all the department heads and kind of fine-tuning this and kind of the projects that we foresee the next year. I think the majority of this board knows where we were a couple of years ago. We've made strides in closing that gap. I think we're continuing that pattern. So if you have any questions now for Stephanie or myself, Diane? Yeah.
Okay, so the first question that I had was on the general fund budget.
Yes.
Is that $16,194? Is that correct? In line with the projected budget for 1920 and the budget for 1920?
Yeah. So essentially what you're seeing is this year we have a smaller budgeted surplus, and what's happening is I've pulled the revenues back in part because we're seeing sales tax come in lower than...
That much?
No, essentially it's a combination of, so the revenues got brought back about 100,000, and then there is increased spending in the departments. So the departments are doing cautiously, and I'd say responsibly starting to look at, we have a lot of things that we need to take care of, so let's start kind of slowly start to take care of those things. So for example, there is a deficit in the police pension fund. Initially, when we started the budgeting process, I was hoping to see a transfer of $100,000 made to that. We didn't have the funds available, so we brought that down to $50,000. Streets departments asked for additional funding to do repairs to the roof. There weren't enough funds for that, so we brought it back and instead are going to do some repairs, repaint it, things like that. The fire department requested, I'm not going to bore you with all of this, but essentially what's happening is compromises. So the instead of having a surplus of $100,000 and not getting anything taken care of, we're starting to make strides toward taking care of some of those projects that have been waiting for a while.
Okay. It just seemed like such a huge difference compared to what was on. I guess what I was looking on page 2. So your total expenditures and your cash on hand. This isn't going to be the difference between those?
No. So what that is this is the difference between our projected revenues and our projected expenditures.
Okay. All right. Makes more sense. What was another question? This was just on the... Oh. Do you remember when... my question was for the waterworks, on the waterworks budget.
Yeah.
When you talked about waste disposal. Do we have like a sewer system? Is that what?
It's actually the dump site, right, Stephanie?
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Dave, would you come up and get a mic, because I get complaints all the time of people not being able to hear at home.
Also, Dave, this is
Thank
pre
you.
the recent developments.
Okay.
So
Our current dump site, we use the street and water both use. For instance, we use it when we use the street sweeper. The leaves that we pick up, we dump there. We water main breaks, the sludge or mud that we excavate, we dump there. Our current site is full, and it's been full for last several months. So we are trying to find an alternate spot to dump, and that money that's been budgeted is there if we find something. I'm in the middle of working on something that I hopefully was supposed to find out today, but I'm hoping that is going to work out very well for us on a temporary basis, but we still need to find something permanent in the village that we could use as a dump site for our waste disposal stuff.
Does that just sit there then, or?
Yeah, we'll be in a perfect scenario is you find like a ditch or an area that needs to be filled in, and then we just use that as backfill to fill up. Our current site is behind BP in the trail. There's it's in the 1300 block of Marietta, and we don't have pictures. We looked for pictures, but it was a dilapidated mess, and it now has been brought up over a 12-year period probably, to where it's nice and level now, and it's nice and clean and clear. So that's the end result. Is we want to take an area that is overgrown and a ditch and bring it up over the years with our waste. The problem is that we're having trouble in finding a spot in Peoria Heights because we're landlocked, and there's just not there are good spots out there, but you don't want a dump site in the middle of a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood. So we're having difficulties finding a decent spot in the Heights. The money that is budgeted right now, the plan was to take dump trucks out to the landfill. It's $700 a truck, so it's we estimated $25,000 a year. That is not economical. But I'm currently working on something. I won't release it now, but I'm hoping to have good news here recently that's going to save us a lot of money.
Okay, so what we're looking at then is just that if we can't find another place, that's what you're going to do?
Yeah, and that is split between the street and water budget. Right. Yeah, and we estimate about $25,000, but we're going to try to avoid doing that at all cost. So
I just wondered what that was. I wasn't sure what the waste disposal was, so thank you for that.
Any other questions about that?
I want you to stay put, just
please. I was going to ask on the BDD.
yes.
Remember when we borrowed that amount of money from them? Are we looking at any time paying any of that back? Or?
So part of the agreement, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, but part of the agreement was that if we did the expansion, that the BDDAC agreed to forgive that promised repayment. So that has been wiped off.
Yeah. That was one of the reasons that when the board voted on that if we were to expand it, that would be reviewed. Plus, it would be in the BDD, so there'd be nothing to repay. So that was one of the pros on expanding the BDD. So, but yeah, you're right.
Another question I have was, with all the economic development that hopefully is going to be happening this year with the hotel and the condominiums, do you know, will they be putting in, just from looking at some of the pictures, it looks like, will they be putting in sidewalks and things like that in front of that building? The one right where the condominiums are going in? If so, are we responsible for that? Or will Mr. Blicken's staff, when he builds that, be putting in sidewalks there as well?
I haven't seen the plans yet. You're talking about the old Gray Boy site?
Yes.
I haven't seen anything, Diane. I'm not sure what they will cover, if that will be sidewalks or not, or what responsibility we'll have, but I think that I'm not sure how soon that's going to happen anyway. I mean, I would hope sooner than later, but I haven't seen anything on it yet, any updated plans.
Okay, and are we still leasing the pump house to them, as far as you know?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And we're receiving revenues on that per
Yes.
month?
Correct.
Once a year?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think there's been about $30,000 of improvements that they've done to the pump house. Is that about right, Stephanie?
Yeah, that's correct also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know if a business just pops up in the Heights or whatever, are you guys responsible for the sidewalks, or is it usually the business?
I don't,
Depending on what they do to the frontage of it and what they do.
Mike, you might as well come up here and have a seat. Take Trustee Kazam's seat so we can.
And if I remember
Hope can hear
right,
you.
4,500, that we were responsible for a part of that easement, obviously, and then the sidewalks they did. But I'm sure in every redevelopment agreement is different.
Probably
Yes.
negotiate.
So I'm sure we can negotiate
That's what I was
that.
thinking.
Okay.
So-
I'm just wondering because,
Yeah.
you know, it doesn't look like we had a whole lot planned for
So I
the
did,
street department, so.
I did forget to cover this, and I'm sorry because I know this is a item of concern. There is actually in the BDD, BDD number 1, and this is part of the beautification project's budget. There is, I believe it's 75,000. Yes, there's 75,000.
What page are you on?
I am in the actual budget itself. I'm on page 11. There's $75,000 in BDD number 1 for curb and sidewalk. We spoke to the engineer, and there are a lot of sidewalks that are going to need significant repairs. Mike and I have been talking a lot about to Alicia about working on, she essentially gave us kind of a 10-year sort of outlook of everything that needs to be done, and that will need to be re-evaluated every year simply because of funding availability, changes in priorities, but I think the comprehensive plan will help us kind of start identifying which of those projects are the most important. One of the projects that she did identify is the sidewalk on Marietta from Prospect going west. It's in need of repairs. It was, I think, about $380,000 to do the whole project. But we checked with her about whether we could do it in segments in order to get it accomplished a little bit more easily, and she said that would definitely work. So we were able to get $75,000 in the BDD. And we're hoping that's right there along Sherman. So we think that they'll be appreciative of having that repaired.
Yeah, absolutely. Did a lot of that cost, was that due to the handicap accessibility? Because I thought that was really expensive to do.
Yeah, and this particular stretch is a very long stretch of sidewalk, so that also contributes to the cost.
So it's from Prospect, probably what?
Up to Atlantic.
Monroe?
Up to Atlantic.
Atlantic.
And then we can keep going, but that stretch between Prospect and Atlantic is really bad. I mean, it's sunk down.
Right. So just within that block is $300,000.
I think the 380 wasn't that to Monroe, and then
That could have been up to Monroe, yeah.
yeah, I think
That would make more
The
sense
first
to me.
portion
But
of it to Atlantic.
I think the first segment, the 75, I think might cover up to Atlantic. I'm
Up to
not quite
Atlantic.
sure, and then the 380 goes further.
Up past Powell and that.
yeah.
My last question is, since we don't really have a department head for you guys, I'm assuming that Administrator Sutton, Chief Sutton, sat in with you, but did you guys have an input on where you needed to spend, or how you needed to spend that money? Okay.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make
I went
sure.
out and looked at the streets and sidewalks and
So
took the worst of the worst to the kind of the best. So,
yeah, they were consulted in the initial formation of the budget, and then they also sat down with myself and Chief Sutton to finalize their budget and go over what exactly the compromises that we discussed needed to be done and how to make everything work.
Okay, and then I'm sure that all of the trustees got an email from one of the residents requesting that we add another, or do the once a week with the recycling.
Yeah.
Is that like super expensive? Is it? Okay, I just wondered. I
And
mean,
they'll give you as many toasts as you want. Like I could call there right now and be like, I want 3 more toasts. She'll be like, okay, we'll drop them off on next Wednesday. Like, I
Okay.
mean, they'll give you as many toasts as you want, so I don't understand why we would need to do it more than 1 pickup a week.
I agree.
How does that work with an apartment complex, though?
The apartment complexes are actually exempted, so if you have basically multifamily units, other than the duplexes, are exempted from the contract. They have to get their own.
They have them. He has them there, though. That's what he's saying. He lives in an apartment complex. They have.
they probably are paying for it though. The complex, correct?
I would have to look into that. It would depend. We can talk after the meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. For now, that's.
then we have the big dumpster out.
Stephanie, I have a question.
Yes.
Who helped set the budget for? Who set the budget for the BDD fund?
So that's essentially done administratively, and then they have not had any meetings. They didn't have a meeting in January or February, so I will be discussing this with them in March. And
So they haven't. The committee itself has not approved any of this.
they haven't seen this yet. No.
So, and then also, now that we have BDD number 2, is there a new advisory committee for that, or this advisory committee is overseeing both districts?
So by ordinance for now, there's not been another advisory committee set up. So by ordinance for now, they are technically over this. They have expressed to me multiple times that they don't want any sort of oversight over that, that's not their section, and they don't feel they have any say over that. So I think probably what's going to happen for this year is that since we don't have a committee in place, we're going to have to approve something. And that's why, especially for this one, I tried to balance it. So they've got the matching grants for the businesses, they've got the housing development program, or the residential rehabilitation program that was promised to the residents, trying to balance and make sure that both residents and businesses are kept happy with that district.
I mean, have we reached out to ask anybody if they want to be on an advisory committee for that?
No.
Is there a plan to do that?
That was the initial plan, is to have a separate advisory committee for BDD2, yes.
I mean this with the utmost respect, but is there a plan that we're actually going to start reaching out to people now to get that set up, or no?
Yes, we can. You know, the problem we're having right now is just participation. I mean, we can't get a quorum for BDD1, to be honest with you. But I'm not sure what the participation will be in BDD2, but we are definitely going to look at it and try to come up with, you know, the same footprint as we did in 1. And hopefully, you know, at the end of the day, and I think all this board knows, they are advisory, as we all agree. But we need participation because we have not had a meeting since when, did you say, Stephanie?
December.
What does the quorum have to be on? How many people have to be on that committee?
That's up to board decision. So we currently have 7 on the.
Right, and that's condensed down. It was 12. We broke it down, knocked it down to 7 because we just couldn't get a quorum at 12. Still can't get. So I don't really want to take it down any lower. But maybe I'm surprised, and we have more participation in 2 than 1. So 1, they've done a great job of getting this program up and running, and I think that's kind of what we're seeing now. Is it's kind of, you know, it's I think it stumbled at first, but now it's really efficient. You know, the program is working well. I think we've had some good applications, and again, it's just, you know, people are busy. Business owners are busy, and we're just not able to get it together. So, but the board's done a great job of or the chairman's done a great job of at least giving me some kind of insight to bring to the board, even though they don't have a quorum. I can give you some of the consensus, and I've done that. So. In a perfect world, I wish, you know, we'd have one every month, and we'd have a quorum, and we'd have something to bring to you, but we just don't, unfortunately.
I mean, if we're having a hard time getting a quorum, do you think it's wise that we have 2 separate committees, even though they're stating maybe that they don't want to do both? Like,
Well,
do they come together?
if we stay with one, I'd recommend combining them and then having a good mix of 1 and 2
I agree with that.
and expanding it maybe to 12 and have 6 and 6. I think you can cut that either way, but I think that'd probably be the best way to do it then. Just have one large committee. But again, not knowing what that BDD2 participation is, even though we don't have it in place now, doesn't mean I haven't asked.
And no one-
Talking to
no
any
one's
businesses, I haven't heard anything back.
Okay.
So again, we're proactive at first, now I'm reactive, and it seems like I'm gonna have to get back out there and beat the bushes and see if we can get some more participation, but that's kind of where we're at on it.
So,
I
think
thought
it should be
Kevin
one
had
committee.
said that he reached out to a lot of them over there. Didn't he say that?
Yes.
And that they just weren't real receptive.
Well, and it's interesting because we had a lot of the residents that were very vocal, a lot of the business owners very vocal that they wanted to be involved in a BDD2. That's how we started having this discussion. But being involved and being on the committee are two different things.
Right.
So I think that's kind of what we've ran into. But I do think we'll be able to figure this thing out and get the right amount of business owners, and I do think we should shoot for one large, maybe a combination, of 6 and 6. I think that sounds fair. So.
I think that even though there are separate committees, I think there's going to be some time where there's overlap of funds being spent.
Yes.
And so I don't think that having 2 committees personally is very wise, because you're going to have BDD 1 being like, oh, we're going to use our money for this, and then BDD 2 is going to be like, we'll just get money from BDD 1. I think it's going to cause some chaos. Whereas if they're sitting down talking about it together, they can come up with a plan themselves all together.
That's true. And then what you're going to see too, this is the other reason too, BDD2 is going to be a little bit different because of the neighborhood program versus 1, which does not. So, anyway, I think you can look at this either way, but whatever the board wants to do, we have to get participation first, see how many people want to be involved. So.
How long is the chairman's seat on this? Like, was it appointed for a certain length of time? I mean, how does that work?
I have to go back and look, but I think he stays in that position until when he no longer wants to be involved. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have a question, Brandon?
I did. So when we sent them the letters that their sales tax is increasing, none of them approached you and said, hey, why are you raising my taxes?
No, there were a few calls. I have a few calls. I think Stephanie had a few calls as well, just inquiring about it. And we gave them that explanation. But I didn't get very many calls, just a few, if that. I'm not sure about Stephanie. I think you might have got a couple, or maybe you didn't.
The initial, I don't think I got too many at
Okay.
all, no.
Yeah. But moving forward, we will proactively try to get some participation in BDD2 so we can have something. And if it's minimal, then we can look at combining the 2 and just have a 6 and 6, a shared one large group. So.
I remember Mr. Shield saying something about he didn't support there being one committee over. He thought that BDD2 should.
Yeah, and I do, and I understand his vision on that, because I think you should be voting on what impacts your area, your district. But I think also his reasoning was behind, they are different, going back to the residential, more in 2 than 1. So, I will talk to him again and see what his stance would be, combining them, if we had one large, because again, we need participation from 1. I don't want to come up with one large and then we lose 5 of those, members in 1, and then we're back to square 1. So I don't want it to be BDD too heavy. So I think let's wait and see what kind of participation we get, and I'll have something for the board soon. So.
And Stephanie, on that general fund cash reserve, where we were looking at kind of how high we were there.
Yeah.
But then you said shortly you'll be able to be doing some transfers.
Yes, so essentially what happens is the economic development transfers a lot of them come into the general fund, and then are kept within the general fund and then made annual payments. And so there are 2 transfers that need to be made to 2 of the business owners of sales tax per their development agreements that are going to be coming in the next month. There's also transfers of BDD tax that need to come out of the general fund and go to the BDD fund because it starts in the general fund and then has to get transferred. So, and then there's also a request on the agenda that we'll be talking about that's a one-time transfer to the police pension fund. So there's significant fund transfers.
Any idea?
I don't have a number off the top of my head. I would be able to give you a better idea probably in about 4 weeks.
Okay, so then technically that's about where we would be ending as opposed to looking at it here.
Yeah, so essentially if you're looking for what I think the cash balance is going to be at the end of the year, I'm anticipating it's going to be about 1.4 million. So there's probably about $200,000 worth of transfers that need to be made.
I got a few questions for you, Stephanie.
Yes.
Under the public relations, marketing, it looks like that line item increased by 100% from $20,000 to $40,000 budgeted for 2021. I don't know, because I made my own sheet.
Yes. So that is essentially,
Public relations.
there was an increase. You'll notice that we had budgeted about $20,000 and I'm anticipating that we'll spend about $25,000. We had a lot more marketing than I thought we were going to do, which is good news. Also, there is a contract that's coming up that for some PR consulting services that a portion of that contract would come out of that budget.
Has that already been approved?
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
And then the economic development went from 60,000 to 68,000 for
Yes.
2021.
Yes, so that the majority of the comprehensive plan costs are going to come out of there, and that's about $50,000 we're looking at right now in costs. The additional 18, that's where the split is essentially of that PR contract. Part of it would come out of marketing, and part of it would come out of economic development. It's kind of a dual-edged, little bit of both. So.
And then under the fire department, professional services,
Yes.
the 12,500, I assume that's for Pearl.
Yes.
Is there any split between administration and the fire department?
Yes, so the administration is currently paying around $200 a month for their services, so they will continue to pay that. I think a little bit more was budgeted in there for that. And then the remainder of the cost of the contract was allocated to the fire department.
What was the monthly cost on that? It was like $1,033.
$929, I believe.
So that comes out to like 11,000.
Yes, but they also have additional things that, I mean, you can see they spent $4,000 this year, so there's additional costs that are in there as well.
Okay.
What's the monthly cost on the cloud service that they have?
Yeah, I didn't see that in here either.
That should be under software. Let me see if it's in there or not. 3,000. I'll look into that and make sure that that's in there.
Yeah, it looks like a 3,000 budget for software, but I think that's like $1,000 a month now, isn't it?
That seems high. I'll go back and check on that though. Make sure that that's in there correctly.
I could be wrong. It happens. My wife does it.
I'm really not sure, Trustee Weisenberg, so I'll go back and check on the minutes and see what we approved that for and then make sure that's in there.
Okay.
So if we were to contract this fire department out to Peoria, would it be less than $263,000?
I don't have that answer at this time, but I will.
Okay, I'd like to know if, because that just seems like, I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying, it seems like if a lot of money.
Yeah.
And for a volunteer fire department to continue to run, and I appreciate all that they do, but if we can farm that out for less than that, we really should look at different ways to cut some costs on here, I think. Kind of like we did with garbage. I know it was a sore subject. This might be a sore subject as well, but it's still something that I think we should just take a look at.
No,
And I'd just be interested to know what Peoria would charge us to take over our dispatching and fire.
Yep, I will find that out.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
And Stephanie, I think it's $1,940 a year.
Okay, then no, that's not in there, so that'll need to increase 2,000.
There was a software line item, right?
Yes.
3,000.
For 3,000, so
Yes.
maybe that's,
Yeah, I'll go back and review because so essentially what I do to come up with this is we look at the budget, we look at what has actually been spent, and then I review, especially if I think that or I know that there's been something in that line item that is unusual. I'll go back and review and look at the history of what we usually spend there, review for any sort of anomalies, and then come up with there's an increase in cost and inflation to get to this year's budget. So it does happen, especially that things like new software, sometimes I forget about those. I'll go back and back out what we were paying for the software, which I think was probably about $600, and then put in the additional costs in to make sure that we get that. So it's probably not going to be the full 2,000, but it'll at least be 1,000, 1,500 that it'll need to be increased.
right. And this is probably a broader question, but sidewalks and curbs for neighborhoods not around Prospect. What is the plan for that? Do we have any intention within the next couple of years to start rehabbing the sidewalks and curbs that are falling apart? I mean, it's really bad. I mean, you drive down Paris or you drive down Longshore doesn't have curbs or sidewalks, but their roads are really bad down there. Even St. Jude, they have like I don't know what those are called. They're more like a gutter that runs down the street. Even those are cracking up real bad. Weeds are growing out of them. I didn't know if...
We do anticipate a program to address all those issues. Trustee Weisenberg, I think, and I'll let Mike speak to this here in a second. And we also have the engineers looking at different grants to come up with to help us because I did not even realize how expensive it was just to do a small section. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I think building that up to really hitting an area hard is kind of what the administration, is recommending. And Mike, if you want to talk about this as far as, how much that cost in a small area?
As far as all the curbs and storm sewers and the catch basins, we got the reason we're doing that money spent on this. We got the GIS already for the professional services. They're going to go out and it's sort of a plan goes from yellow to green. It kind of gives us the conditions of different areas, the whole heights, every road we own. It's about 128 lane miles, and that will kind of set us up for which areas we really need to focus on. And me and Alicia, the engineer, we went around ourselves the different areas that I think that really need to be focused on. But the people that's going to do all this stuff, that's going to go out and evaluate us, will really give us a report card on what we really need to do first, where to start and move up. And I know there's a lot to do, but that will help us out tremendously. And believe me, I'd like to do everything that I see and everybody here in the community too, but it's just been lack of, I think, not this administration, but lack of before that this dropped off the radar, and now we're going to pay for it. So,
how long ago did we get rid of that program, Mike?
Oh, this had to be over 10, 12 years ago, I bet.
Well, I was on the board when we were doing it, and we were trying to do it. We took care of the areas that didn't cost as much, but we could get them taken care of. And we tried to, because there's a lot of streets that don't have sidewalks or curbs.
Right.
A lot of it, they don't even have a curb to where, it rains, and the rain comes into their yard and into their house and everything. And it just got to the point where we tried to do it, and I think we just plain ran out of funds. We did the one that was least expensive, but
Yeah, astronomical cost. The way we did it before was like when we seal coated roads. I'm talking years and years ago. We kind of did the sidewalks in that area in conjunction with the street. They weren't working against each other, but we seal coat, got the road real good. Then they did the whole block with the handicap ramps that Diane was asking about, and it was high back then, but then we just it fell off the radar way back then. So it's just now it's we're gonna have to start with this evaluation and go forward.
Do we know
see.
when that grading and evaluation will be done?
It's in the works now, and so they're trying to get the final cost and everything to us and things, and then it should be probably in the next few months here.
Yeah, it was through Puats.
I went to a meeting, with through Puats down there, so Hannah's the one's working on it, so that will help us out tremendously, and then it will be on our GIS system too, so we should, it's just a starting point where we're gonna have to start. It's just, like I told you, I know a lot of places we can
Right,
start,
but-
but it takes a little cash.
So we
so.
think maybe next budget year, start a program back up? I mean,
Like Stephanie, we spending money cautiously and stuff and saving up for them type. I call that a big program, the street or the sidewalk program. So I think once we save some money, what do you think, Steph?
Yeah, it could
Yeah,
potentially
so,
be
I
next
mean,
year.
that
It could
cover-
potentially.
Yeah, the conversation with Alicia was incredibly helpful to kind of start getting our arms around what exactly we're looking at, what the needs are, and it's millions and millions of dollars like we all expected. It's one of those things that now that I'm aware of specifics, it's a lot easier to start saying, oh, what about this? What about this grant? What about this, okay, this is in this area, and we've got this money over here taking care of this problem, so let's go ahead and we can transfer and we can do this now. So I think being just aware of it and the specifics, it will start to make it easier to work it in and start making some progress on these things.
Yeah, and like Stephanie said too, there's a lot of grants too through Puats we're working on now, trying to get money, setback money and stuff. There's different programs, so we are working on them. I go to meetings once a month down there, so as soon as I get something, it's like, let's get it, every penny counts, if we can get, even if it's matching or whatever, 80-20 or whatever, so everything counts. So I'm on that, so I want to get as many grants as we can.
I can't remember what she had given us for a projection of how long that seal coating was going to last on Prospect, but didn't she say
5 years.
5 years?
How many?
5 years.
5 years, and then we have to look at replacing.
Yeah, that's
Is that
on.
what she had said, if I remember correctly?
So I think in the sheet that she gave us, in 8 years, we were going to need to start the first half of the rehabilitation project, and I think the projections were $7 or $8 million to do that, and then 5 years after that, maybe 3 years after that, we would need another $7 or $8 million to complete the second half of it.
Do you think there's grants available for that?
She seemed optimistic that
Yeah.
she said it would be a good project for a grant program. So Alicia's been talking to us a lot and working with us. I think that what we're kind of trying to do is set ourselves up that this year is going to be in MFT and also this. We're going to be taking a year to kind of set ourselves up and get things started and try to get those projects in the works.
And if you remember, we asked for money for Prospect Road in the capital bill. We ended up getting a whole lot more for Galena Road. So, I mean, it was a big victory as far, I think it was 16 million we asked for Prospect, and we ended up getting 68 million.
Yeah,
but
I remember.
nothing happened with Prospect. So I wouldn't give up on that. It's a high priority, and I think our state representatives certainly see Peoria Heights doing well as far as compared to other cities in the area that they represent, that we have some growth, that we have some investment going on. I think they're aware of that, and that I believe will help us when we get to the right point. We did apply for an infrastructure grant on Cyberling and Atlantic with the EDC that we're waiting to hear back on too. So we're doing everything we can to find pots of money.
Yeah, because just another street, Toledo, that doesn't have anything. It needs sidewalks and gutters. I mean, it's all right down the road. There's no place for the water to go to but people's yards.
Yeah, Trustee Gadd, if referring to Toledo and like Longshore, as Trustee Weisenberg mentioned, if you're going to put sidewalks in those areas, you have to put storm sewers too, because they are not storm sewers. So that's an additional.
Yeah, I understand that. We've talked about it before.
Yeah.
It's Stuff's not cheap.
Those are the main two areas. Can you think of anywhere else, areas that don't have storm sewers? I know Toledo and Longshore. There's maybe a couple others.
Yeah, well, most of your streets, we're gonna have to put curb and gutter. You have to put storm sewers first. Indiana, I mean, I can go on Toledo, you got Boulevard, Illinois, off your alley. All of them have to have storm sewers tied into existing on the next block. So that's, and that, I don't even want to guesstimate on how much that would be before you could put your curb and gutter in. So.
But I
it's
think
just-
we're at a good start.
Yeah.
Because you're meeting with Alicia.
Right.
You're getting your list prepared of what we're looking forward to in the future.
Right.
We're getting costs down. We kind of know what the cost is going to be. Each year that we delay, it's going to be even more. The economy,
Right.
obviously. So I think you guys are doing a good start here on this. So.
Right, and in Toledo too, they got, what was that, Safe Kids?
Oh, gosh,
The grant
it's-
for that, we're gonna try to get in. What was it, Steph? I can't
It's a
remember.
program that basically wants to help communities put in sidewalks to help kids walk to school. And so, yes,
Yeah,
thank
that's
you.
it. I couldn't think of it.
And so essentially, and it is a renewable grant. You can apply for it every year. And so we're looking at trying to get into that program and start applying and then work on, was it Illinois or Indiana that Alicia said was going to be a great
To go to the
place.
back to school?
To go to that back way.
Yeah, Toledo there, where you go in the back gate there, that's where we're gonna try to focus on,
So-
get side curb gutters.
It would take time, but essentially we could work a block at a time to get that sidewalk and use this grant to help get sidewalks installed in that area.
Toledo, yeah.
And
What's
just,
the percentage? Sorry to interrupt. What's the percentage on that? Do you know?
it varies from year to year, so it varied from 20% to 0%.
So it just depends on
Depends on
what
what, yeah.
happens that year.
Yeah, and I meant to talk about this in my presentation, I forgot. I think it's important to note that we do have a projected surplus this year. The village is currently in a stronger financial position than it's ever been, but also the village still has kind of a lot of eggs in a few baskets. And so the village is still not in danger, but it's could tip and be in trouble again. One bad year and things would not be going well. So I think what staff is trying to do is start to address these problems, but start slowly and cautiously so that we don't overextend ourselves. I know that there's a lot of need and we want to see things accomplished as quickly as possible. So we're trying to balance moving quickly and not dragging our feet, while also not going so fast that we get ourselves into a financial position that is not to our benefit. It's kind of a hard balancing act.
And Brandon, we do have a running list of things that are in dire need.
Yeah.
Plus I have a list of no curbs and gutters. So we're proactive on that. It's just trying to get the funding to do it, and we're trying to trying to get every avenue we can with funding, especially if it's free money, a little bit. So, but we are on it, and it's going to be a long haul. But once we start, like Stephanie said, just a little bit at a time, and
We'll get there.
we'll get there.
We will.
So,
Anyone else?
I do have. I'm on the.
I just want to take this time to thank everyone on.
I have a
Yeah, go
question.
ahead. I'm sorry.
I have a question. I'm sorry. I should have spoke louder. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm hooked on this waste disposal, whatever we got going on here. Me and the waste doesn't agree anyways. This waste disposable fee, is that the garbage and recycle?
No, this is specifically the Public Works produces waste that they need to either put somewhere or have disposed of, and it's essentially
Revenue?
no, it's not.
I'm confused.
She's on the revenue sheet.
She's on the revenue. Okay, so that is, if you're on the revenue sheet, then what you're looking at is the waste disposal fee. That's the charge on the water bill for
Okay.
waste disposal.
It's from the residents.
Okay, so this is what we pay.
Are you looking at 4,500, 4,501, or 4,508?
Yeah, okay, so the waste disposable doesn't mean the same on, I don't even know where it's at.
It's not the same as the expenditure in Public Works. They're different things. Yeah. One is the amount that we collect from the residents on the water bill. The other is the amount to send dump trucks to the landfills to get rid of things from water main breaks and from street sweeping.
Please, street sweeping.
Okay,
That's the worst case scenario, like Dave's working on something now. And
right.
I've been looking at a few things, but.
Well, I was a
might-
little confused of why
Yeah.
waste disposal here, and then I thought, well, wait a minute, it's up back here too, that
Right.
doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, the only reason
Okay.
we have it there is like for emergency,
It's not
because if
bad.
we don't have nowhere to take it, we have to take it there, so
Okay.
that's why we put it
I
there.
just wanted to confirm that. That's my question. Sorry, go ahead, Ian.
Anyone else? So again, thanks to the staff, and I think one of the main duties of the administrator is to present a balanced budget, and I thank you, Dustin, for doing that. You're available to meet with trustees on an individual basis if they have any additional questions and concerns, right?
Correct. If you would like to sit down and go over anything individually, let me know. We'll set up a time to have you in. If you only have time for a phone call, let me know. I'll be available.
So what's the time frame then? We'll have this at a departmental meeting and then send it to the full board for final approval?
Correct. I would say the next date that we will look at this for review would be the 17th or 24th.
24th.
24th. And then approval of the board meeting in April, I believe. That's historically, that's what we've done. So that will be April 14th.
It has to be done in April, right, council?
Yes. So April 14th would be the adoption of the budget. We can review it. I'd like to have some time for phone calls, questions, to meet and go over whatever issues the board might have. So I guess whatever timeline you think you need. If you want to do it on the 10th, well, no, we don't have a meeting on the 10th. It'll be the 17th, which is a board meeting.
So like, let's say there's something on here, just like we did before, if there's
Right.
something on here that we disagree with or we want to
Yes.
talk about more, basically then on the 24th, we're going to come back together and discuss
Correct.
what each trustee has talked to you about, or...
Well, if you have any concerns or disagreement, I would ask you to try and iron that out with the administrator and come to a compromise. If you're not able to do that, then you always have the opportunity to make an amendment to the budget then.
I just remember, like, I can't remember, I think it was the fire department that year asked for a Ford F-250.
Right.
And we were all sitting up here, and they came and made their case and, talked to us about, why they thought they needed the truck and stuff like that. So you're not planning on having these types of conversations, like where somebody can come forward and say,
Sure,
here's why we need this?
Yes,
Absolutely.
And I've had those meetings now with department heads already. We've already started going through all that individually. And at that time, we had, as you remember, Trustee Mariscal, we had a $900,000 deficit. So we were not, we cut out all vehicle purchases. So there were a lot of things cut that year. But I think that moving forward, getting together one-on-one would be the first step, and I'm sure we can come to a compromise on whatever it is, the issues any board member might have. I'm sure we'll get through it, but if not, like the mayor said, we come on the 24th and kind of roll it out here. But I don't see those issues, like you just brought up, being an issue right now, and we've already started that. I've already met with Chief Walters, I met with David and Mike. We're getting through this. I think that everyone's being very cautious, responsible with their budget. I'm not running into those issues that we ran into that year, but feel free, a date or time, we can go over any issues you might have.
Sure.
I do have one more.
Yeah.
In the budget, did we budget for the lady to come back and do our flowers?
Yes.
Yes.
It's in here. Where's it at?
So it's
Is it under Tower Park?
her salary is split between street and tower, since she maintains both up here at the tower and down in the downtown district.
Okay.
And then there is in tower and in street, there's a line item that is maintenance parks, and then also in street there's a line item that says maintenance public spaces, and that's where the cost for the flowers and her supplies are all coming from.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that we have that included.
Yes, and I think we're looking to, do you want to speak about this?
Yes.
Okay.
We are, last year was our first year of having a Tower Parks groundskeeper, and we learned a lot. One thing we learned was She worked Monday through Friday part-time. And she did a fabulous job of keeping the flowers up. The problem is that, especially when it was very hot on Fridays or on Saturdays and Sundays, we relied on some kids at Tower Park to water the flowers, and you know how kids are. So she came back to work on Monday and had to bring these things back to life. So the idea that we came up with was to hire we hired 3 summer help kids last year to work for Public Works. I believe we're going to eliminate that down to 2 and use that spot and hire a second groundskeeper, a part-time groundskeeper who will work with Tanya on a couple days a week and overlap and come in and do Saturday and Sunday responsibilities, watering the flowers up and down Prospect and Tower Park. That way there's no concern about them.
No, did you not say that the BDD was looking at wanting to put in some more pots? So then would she be taking care of all of that? Which would increase?
Yeah, and that's all been in the thought process. If we add, and I've told this to her, and I've mentioned this to Chief Sutton and to Stephanie, the more we add, the more it's going to put on her as far as a workload, and it's going to put on the village as far as a payroll expense for her and for her potential assistant. The plan is to have this second person also be a Tower Park manager, so they would also manage the employees of the Tower Park. Last year, that was done with the girls in the office, and that kind of became a lot for the girls in the office, having to try to be out there with these high school kids and being here. So that person would kind of overlap and do 2 combined duties of Tower Park and an assistant groundskeeper. So that's the original plan and idea. And it's going to, like I said, it's going to be, that salary will be eaten up by taking 1 person away from the summer help at Public Works.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll go on to police. Still under new business. Trustee DeVore, the first is the discussion of speed limit on Terrace View Lane.
We briefly talked about this, and I think that we all had some questions on how much signage would cost for us to do that, or if we did want to reduce the speed limit, were we only going to do it there, things like that. So this is just back up for rediscussion to see where we are with it, and to see how everyone is feeling on it. Do we happen to know how much the street signs cost that we were interested in?
Each 25-mile-an-hour sign costs $60.
Those are the larger ones that we discussed?
They're the state law ones, yeah, they're $60 a piece.
Okay.
The regulatory.
How many do we need?
On there,
Those are the speed limit signs we got for the special events with detouring traffic. I think what Trustee Weisenberg was referring to, he was wanting a different sign for the neighborhoods, from my understanding, a larger sign. And I'm not sure, we don't have a price on those yet.
Okay.
So.
It's kind of a speed limit sign that doubles as a "there's kids here" sign. It says the speed limit, but then above it it says, I took a picture, unless I dreamt it.
was it kids playing or something to that effect? Or?
I'm going to go out and get another picture. But it says, like, this is you're entering a residential zone, and then the speed limit, it's like probably twice the size of the normal speed limit. So when you pull into the neighborhood, it catches your eye because it's not a normal speed limit sign.
Right.
And it's just another, I don't know, hey, this is a neighborhood, slow down type thing. Because we have a lot of neighborhoods that are right off of main roads. So when people pull off those roads, as you well know, they gun it. Mm-hmm. So anything to catch the attention of the motorist to say, hey, you're in a dense residential neighborhood, slow down. Some will, some won't.
Right.
But like I said, I'd hope to print something and show everyone, but I don't know what I did with that picture. So they're about twice the size of a normal
regular speed limit sign.
And if you go in Peoria, most of their residential neighborhoods that are off of main roads have those different signs.
Okay. I've probably seen them, I just don't know what it looks like. So.
Do you feel like this is something that we're going to discuss with all the stuff going on with Hazel Levine? About the speed limits in the neighborhood? I mean, I just think personally, like 30 is a little fast in the neighborhood.
Yeah, village-wide, it will be. It'll be something that I guarantee will be discussed.
I mean, I think they all need to drop, personally.
But do we necessarily need a comprehensive plan to, I mean, if we know it needs to be dropped, then why wait for the comprehensive plan?
Why do we have to?
No, we don't. I think what Trustee DeVore was talking about, just as far as getting more of a consultant's view of a village as a whole, is that what you, I mean?
I just was curious if that was like, because how do we roll that out? We just we pass an ordinance, say that we're dropping our residential speed limit to 20, and then we put all new signs up? I don't know how that works.
Some communities do that, and that's why last meeting we had, I said, I recommended maybe starting with five areas, maybe that are generating majority of concern. I don't know. The
end result for me is dropping them all.
Yeah.
That's what I envision.
If we drop them in 5 areas, though, like how do we stop that? We're going to have to separate those areas by some sort of way, because how do you?
Correct.
You know what I mean?
There's guidelines, stipulations how we enforce that, but I've just said to start with that. I'm not saying to stop with that.
No, I know.
I'm not for or against either way. Again, you've heard me say this before. It's all about enforcement. Some will abide by speed limits, some will not. That's anywhere. But I'm not opposed either way. My biggest concern, if we're doing the entire village, that's going to be a major cost, especially with the larger signs.
And that's something we want to think about right now when we're talking about budgets.
Right. So I think that, I've seen some of those. I get flyers all the time with different signage and everything else. So I'll do a little research and some calculations, see what kind of ballpark we're looking at. Okay, and as far as, that was just a recommendation as far as starting with 5, because I didn't know of any areas, but if you're talking about doing a complete, the entire village, then it really is simple as passing an ordinance. Council, I'm sure, will tell you that. So
if we pass the ordinance, it wouldn't be in effect until we get the signage up.
Correct, that's correct.
So even though we pass the ordinance, hey, we're lowering our speed limits, we can still roll it out neighborhood by neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah. Correct.
Can I ask us, would it be cheaper to put it, to paint it on the road instead of the sign like we did out on Prospect when we switched it to 25?
To a certain extent.
No, you're gonna have enforcement issues anyway if you just.
Well, I know that. I was just thinking, would it be cheaper to get the word out? You don't have to do every so many feet. Even if you just did a block.
I think if we passed the ordinance village-wide and then rolled it out, like Trustee Weisenberg stated, that if we only do a couple here and there, we wouldn't have to do it all at once.
Right.
I think that would probably be the best.
I don't think all the signs have to be the large signs. I don't think that would be, you know what I mean? Like if you're driving down Scioto, Marion.
You're asking the wrong person, because I'm all about uniformity. So.
They all got to be the same size.
How many signs do you think we have right now in the neighborhood?
The speed limit signs, was
Yeah.
it 50, Chris?
Yeah, I think there was 50 or 60.
50 or 60 speed limit signs in the village that are irregular if you want to drop them from 30 to 25.
This might
Are
be a
all
question.
the residential neighborhoods in the Heights 30 miles an hour?
Yeah.
If not posted.
If it's not posted, it defaults to 30. If we lower the
60
speed limit,
times 6.
it's still not posted, will it still default to the state limit?
No, we're one rule. We can have the default speed limit without signs lower than the state. I'll look at that, but I'm certain we can. Unless otherwise posted, right?
Right.
Right. It could be outlined in the ordinance. Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm like Chief Sutton. I don't have strong feelings either way. I support whatever the people in the neighborhood want. If they want lower speed limits, let's do it, and let's get on it. We can find the money to pay for the signs. We've got some wiggle room, so that's something you all should be thinking of. But I would also make sure that we listen to people in the neighborhoods and make sure that we're doing what they want us to do. So as long as we can get the word out to get them, to inform them of what we're trying to do.
Do we want to maybe the next public safety departmental try to get the word out to get representatives of the neighborhood?
You're telling us to do that, Minister? We'll do it.
Should we, I guess what's the question?
I think we should.
Yeah.
I think we should. Have you driven 30 down their street? I tried to.
Yeah, it's
Scary.
Yeah, it's way too fast.
Especially when you're talking the neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks, and we have a lot of people that are parking on the street.
And then
30 is fast.
And then you have kids running in between the cars and the roads because they're that
Well, and
sidewalks.
I agree. We're talking about residential streets, and It frustrates me when I try and drive down Glen or Prospect sometimes and people are passing me, so those speed limits, in my opinion, might be too high as well. So I think we can have a good discussion about it. But so, do we want to put this on the next agenda for continued discussion and get the word out to the public that we're going to be taking this up? Is that something?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Next, Trustee DeVore, you have a discussion of a one-time transfer of $62,668 to the Peoria Heights Police Pension Fund.
I know we briefly talked about this, but I'm gonna give this to Stephanie to maybe re-explain this to everybody.
So essentially every year the Department of Insurance issues a report to the police pension funds and instructs them on how much funding they have, what their unfunded liability is, and to be in compliance with the state's mandate that funds are 90% funded by 2040, that how much money needs to be contributed that year. The Police Pension Fund received their report from the Department of Insurance, and the amount that the village levied for this current fiscal year was not sufficient to meet the recommended contribution amount. Since there is a surplus, staff is recommending that we make a one-time transfer of the difference between the recommended contribution amount and the amount that's already been contributed this year to the Police Pension Fund in order to make them whole and make sure that we are not losing ground on the funding for the Police Pension Fund.
Stephanie, was that 90 by 2040?
I believe it's 90 by 2040, but I would have to go and check on that, yeah.
And are we on pace to meet that?
So these reports from the Department of Insurance tell us every year how much needs to be contributed to be on pace for that. So basically, if additional contributions are made, then that would reduce future contributions. If less contributions are made, then that would increase future contributions. So yes, we're on track as long as we comply.
As long as we make this payment, then as of right now, we're trending on track.
Correct.
Okay.
How much have we already paid this year?
Let's see. Nope. Budget. This year we levied. There it is. The levy for this year was approximately $354,000. We received in $352,000 of that. So that has all been paid to the police pension. So $352,000.
And then we're going to do another 62.
Correct.
And we don't really have an option on that, do we?
No.
Does a consolidation of these funds play any factor into this?
So the consolidation we're not entirely sure what the consolidation is going to do at this point because the state doesn't really know what that's going to look like. And I'm going to be quiet. I think Chief has something to say about this.
I know that our representatives went down to the meeting down at Peoria 2 days ago, and she's exactly right. There were so many unknowns, and it's so early. I know their next meeting's in Aurora. But it's so early right now, and just from what I've seen through the Illinois Chiefs Association, that a lot of this consolidation will affect Tier 2. If you ask me what all that entails, I know it isn't me, so I know that I can't go through it all, but I know that it's so early now, there are a lot of questions, and so the majority of the people left the meeting the other day just as confused as they were before they went in. So.
Is it mainly for towns that have combined police and fire, like Peoria, where they have paid police and paid fire that?
No, from my understanding, it's just to cover, I mean, even though we're in a lot better shape than we have been in the past, there are a lot of communities that are worse than we were. So I think this is just an effort to bring everybody online. So unfortunately, the communities that are full, that are kind of dragging everybody else up with them. But to see how that's going to look, it's just so early. There weren't a lot of questions answered the other day. So
consolidation was an attempt to help with the state law that really restricted investment and kind of hindered smaller funds on how they could invest. That's supposed to help with the investment and the investment revenues. Unfortunately, the reality of the situation is that municipalities need to contribute more to these pension funds because they didn't contribute them in the past. And so consolidation will not fix that. It will help some with the investment amounts that are being received, which will help the funds, but municipalities are still going
Because
to have
weren't
to
we at a
contribute.
level where we could invest more?
Yes, and that
Did
helped
we
us.
back off? Now, are we still?
No, we're
in
still at that, yes. Yeah.
What percentage are we vested?
The last report I received, I believe it was 46%.
46%. And I know there's several House bills pending to actually knock that 90% down.
Yes, in my opinion, and I won't go into it a lot because, I mean, a lot will change. The state will modify that end date. They will have to. They will review that. They've already done it, I believe, twice now. They're gonna change that. But the reality of the situation is that if 40% fund or 46% funded, the village does need to make as much in contributions as we can afford to make.
Okay, so that'll be on the agenda for action?
Correct. That'll be on the next board meeting.
Anything else under police, Trustee DeVore?
No.
All right, anything, Chief?
Thank you.
We'd be at administration. Trustee Gett, before I turn it over to you, Council, I'm going to ask you to explain what we're doing here. All three of these are related, so.
All three of these items, for those who were here at the January meeting, there were 3 trustees present. And under state statute, that's a quorum because the mayor was present. You need a majority of the board. The mayor is part of the board. So there's 7 people, 4 is a quorum. I did not realize at that meeting that we have a local ordinance that says for our board, a quorum is 4 trustees, not 4 board members. So we don't, in other words, count the mayor toward the quorum. So there were 3 ordinances that were on that agenda that are important enough that to the extent there's any question that complying with state law is not enough because of our local ordinance, I wanted to redo those, and that's why they're on as ratification and approval. So for the 3 people that were here at the January meeting, this is all new, all rehash of what we talked about. For those that weren't, we're going to take them one at a time and try to go quickly.
Could we change our ordinance then to match so we don't have to have this problem again of where we
Well, that's
are having to
that's a
rehash
really
it?
good question. I just talked to the mayor about that. I mean, we have attendance issues that so rarely do we ever have even one person gone. I mean, frequently one person is gone, but I don't remember 2 people being gone. I never have seen 3 people being gone.
Yeah, well, it happened, so I mean, just to
we
cover
could.
it, I mean, I think we should change that, so.
If that's what the board would like, I would make it consistent with state statute to be a majority of the board.
So, not to get off topic here, but I was going through the code, and I didn't see where, under the municipal code, where the mayor could vote. There was nothing that, you had said because we were missing a trustee, the mayor could substitute a trustee.
Sure.
I didn't find that anywhere in the code.
Sure.
And I didn't
So-
find it anywhere in our code either.
Right. The mayor can vote when a proposition doesn't get a majority vote of the trustees. So if anything that gets 3 votes, and that's regardless of whether there's 6 trustees here or in villages that don't have the ordinance, we have 3 trustees here. Anything that doesn't get 4 affirmative votes from trustees, the mayor can vote on. Not obligated to vote, but can vote.
The state. So that particular night, we had 3 people.
We had 3
and 2 voted
trustees.
yes and 1 voted no. So really, didn't that kind of cancel it out?
Well, not on these ordinances, there were things on the agenda, I think, trying to think what else might have been on the agenda, but no, everything, all of these ordinances got the 3 trustees that were here voted yes, and the mayor.
You're right. It was the request for approval that was shut down. Yeah. Okay.
Fine Arts Fair. There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So just for safety's sake, even though we're home rule and you think that we're okay, we want to be safe and go back and,
I think it makes sense to have it mirror the state law.
okay. So that's what we're gonna do.
Do we have to wait till another meeting to make
Yep.
that?
Yep. It's an
Okay.
ordinance, so we got to change it by an ordinance.
Okay.
Okay, so Trustee
That
Gett,
brings us to the action items then.
the first would be ratification and approval of ordinance 2020-1617.
I make a motion
Ordinance
to approve.
imposing responsible bidder requirements for public works projects. I'd ask for a motion to approve that.
I make a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Trustee Carter? Aye. Trustee Mariscal?
Aye.
Trustee Gett?
Aye.
Trustee Weisenberg?
Aye.
Trustee DeVore?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next is an action item, ratification and approval of ordinance 2020-1618, an ordinance abating the general obligation taxes levied for year 2019 to pay debt service on taxable general obligation bonds, alternate revenue source, series 2016. Trustee Gett?
I make a motion to pass ordinance 2020-1618.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
What was that again? Can you explain that one again?
Yeah, these, both of these abatement ordinances are the bond issues with the TIF developments. One of them being Trafskers, the other one I think was 4,500. Yeah, they have automatic tax levy feature in the bond ordinance to cover the bond payment. And then every year we've got to go through, and Stephanie tells us we've got enough money in that bond, set aside bond fund for that bond issue to meet that tax obligation. So the taxpayers, because it would be a property tax levy, so we have to abate it every year. It's automatically imposed. So this is our saying we're not going to levy that tax because we have enough money to make the payment.
Anyone else? Madam Clerk?
Trustee Carter?
Aye.
Trustee Mariscal?
Aye.
Trustee Gett?
Aye.
Trustee Weisenberg?
Aye.
Trustee DeBoer?
Aye.
All right, that passes. Finally, ratification and approval of ordinance 2020-1619, an ordinance abating the Special Service Area Number 1 taxes for the year 2019 to pay debt service on taxable general obligation bonds, alternate revenue source, series 2016. Trustee Gett?
I make a motion to approve ordinance 2020-1619.
In a second, please.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk?
Trustee Carter?
Aye.
Trustee Mariscal?
Aye.
Trustee Gett?
Aye.
Trustee Weisenberg? Trustee DeBoer?
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Thank you. Trustee Gett, anything else under administration?
No, sir.
Dustin?
Nothing, Mayor?
Okay, we've been miscellaneous business. Any miscellaneous business come for the board?
I do, actually.
No, I'll let you go first.
Okay, we have a board meeting on March 17th, which is St. Patrick's Day, and since we did approve for like the road to be closed and things like that, I didn't know if anyone felt the same, that maybe we should cancel our meeting or reschedule or whatever so that we could attend that or be a part of the community with that, and I didn't know how everyone felt about it.
As long as there's not a lot on the agenda, and I talked to the mayor here and Dustin, we don't think we have a lot going on the 17th, and I agree with you. We probably should cancel it or postpone it. That's all.
I'm in favor. I mean, the town's just going to be so busy with.
Yeah.
It's also the primary day for voting.
Oh, that's right, it is.
It's
Yeah.
what?
It's the primary day for voting.
No. Well, I'll be tired anyhow because I'm pedaling on the bus.
No voting for Jeff.
Well, isn't that during the day though? During the.
Yeah, but I'll still be tired.
Yeah, the pedal bus is during the parade downtown.
Are you going to be able to go?
Yeah, we don't
We got an invitation. Yeah, I see that. Sure.
Well,
I hope you guys aren't pedaling through snow. That's all I got to say.
administration's okay with whatever the board chooses to do. We'll be here if you want us here, but it's your meeting, so if you decide you want to change it around or cancel it, that's up to you. We'll make things work, and I know there is a lot going on in the village that day, a big celebration, but that's up to you. So, council, if the board did decide to cancel that meeting, it's a simple vote.
Simple vote, and we need to post it, but, yep.
Do we have to can I make a motion at this meeting, or do we have to make a motion at our next meeting?
It would be an action item, so it should be on the agenda.
Can it be on the next?
Yes. Just so we get everyone's thoughts on this, where everyone's leaning, at least a consensus. So if you decide to cancel that meeting, we can prepare to have things, any business that needs to be taken care of, we can get that out of the way. Anybody have strong feelings either way, or are you leaning?
No.
The only real concern I have is when we have the public meetings, there's an opportunity for the public to address the board. And if we cancel the meetings, we may not have business that day, but there may be a citizen that would want to come before the board.
We can always reschedule it, or they can always come another day, or they can come up here individually and talk to the chief, or...
You and I have talked about this, and I see your point, and I don't disagree. But again, we serve at the pleasure of our board here, and you all decide what you want to do. I'm okay with having the meeting, I'm okay with canceling, but I certainly were available at business office that day for calls or concerns that people have. But
So Mark, can it be moved? Can the meeting move?
Like, so we do it on the 10th instead of the 17th?
You can
Yeah,
always
so
move
we can
meeting.
say that we're gonna have the actual meeting on the 10th instead of the 17th?
Do it the
Absolutely.
day before or the next
As
day?
long as we post notice 48 hours in advance, we can move it.
We can't do it the day before because that's a ZBA meeting. So it'd have to be like
The week,
the 10th. It'd
They
have to be
can't
the
get,
10th.
there's another meeting scheduled that Richwoods Township has their meetings on the
The 10th.
10th, yeah.
Okay.
The 18th? What if you do it the next day?
they only meet for a half an hour, I think. I mean, you could have probably the meeting at 6 o'clock on the,
Wednesday, the
or
18th?
6:30.
No?
What was on, you were saying on the 10th or the 18th?
couldn't we make the 24th our meeting?
Just skip it all together?
Because we wanted to talk about the budget and
Yeah.
do some.
We can, we don't, as a practice, take action at the departmental meetings,
Right.
but when we have a departmental meeting, that's a village board meeting.
Okay.
We just organize our meetings in such a fashion that we have one meeting where where we try to do the actual business items, and the others are more like committee of the whole, but that doesn't mean we can't take action like we did tonight at a departmental meeting.
I would just recommend we try and squeeze the business in. If you decide to cancel the third Tuesday meeting, that we try and squeeze any business in on the first or the fourth Tuesday. I think.
I agree.
I think I'm okay with changing the meeting, but some of us do have things plugged into our calendar, and we've got a lot coming up with the comprehensive plan, a lot of meetings next week, I believe, so there might be a conflict, but
That's my,
how about,
my question too. Once we get done with this, can you tell us the dates that are coming up, like Wednesday and Thursday? What are those dates? I mean, what are they for? I got an invitation, but I'm not sure exactly if I understand what they are for.
yeah, so does somebody, Stephanie or Dustin, do you have those dates in front of you?
I'm trying to find them there.
It's like the 4th and
Next
5th.
Wednesday and Thursday.
March.
While you're looking at that, so we're going to at least put that on.
Both of them?
Trustee DeVore, your request to cancel the meeting, we'll put that on for action
Okay.
for next Tuesday.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
And then if somebody wants to amend that, council, then it'll be on, it's noticed. Okay. We got the consensus to do that, so, Mr. Administrator, Madam Clerk, next, on the next meeting, which will be next Tuesday, we will have an item to cancel the March 17th meeting. And that could be voted up or down, or it could be amended. So, So Trustee Carter asked if you could explain what's going to happen next week with the comprehensive plan meetings on Wednesday and Thursday night.
Did you have that document?
Yes.
Did you get this flyer?
Well, I did get a flyer, but it's for the 5th, but I thought there was something going on the 4th. I thought I got an email or something on the 4th.
That's here at Village Hall. That's Haas Levine staff kickoff meeting.
Okay,
here.
so that's still going on here.
Yes, that's here at 11 o'clock in Village Hall, correct.
At 6:30.
Yes.
Thursday will be at the grade school. So we decided to move it there. We're hoping to have a big turnout. We're hoping that this room would not be big enough, so that's why the grade
Okay.
school.
And that on Thursday night at 6:30, and that's the visioning workshop, and that will be held at the school.
So next week we have Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday we have
Correct.
meetings.
Yeah,
Okay, I just want to make sure that I have those down.
a busy week.
Did you guys get one of these?
Any other miscellaneous, Trustee
Yes,
West?
Mayor. According to the Open Meetings Act, we're supposed to review our closed sessions no less than twice a year, and we're coming up on a year since I've been elected, and we haven't done it. So when are we going to review those closed door sessions
That usually is a recommendation by council. Council, do you have a recommendation?
We've actually prepared the minutes, and we're ready to have them whenever the board is ready to have a closed session to review them. So I would say the next business meeting.
We do that next Tuesday?
Well,
What we discussed is, I think that council did have those ready. We were going to go into executive session last time, but I also made the recommendation that I have an update coming up on Kingman. I thought maybe one executive session, we'll go talk about both items instead of have two executive sessions. So that's one reason that I asked council to stand down on that. But I think that.
but by canceling the 17th, I won't have the Kingman update on the 10th. We're moving it back.
So 24th.
Well, we can do it on the 24th.
Right. So I guess that would be the.
So we'll do a year's worth of minutes on the 24th.
And then vote to release or not, or to hold?
Correct.
Based on your recommendation?
Correct.
Does that answer your question, Trustee Reisberg?
It does.
You have anything else under miscellaneous?
Nope.
Anyone else? Okay, Trustee Gett,
Make a motion to adjourn.
do I have a second?
Second.
I do. All those in favor of the motion to adjourn signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Thanks, everyone, for a good meeting.
Thanks.